Call of Duty seems to be headed back to the annual release structure, something that we thought they were leaving behind. And with MW3 coming this year and being billed as a full game release after what we thought was going to be DLC, we now have an interview where the president is saying, listen, we've got games planned all the way out for a couple of years, games plural. And I want to talk about what that means with cadence, especially with what we know about MW3. I want to kind of talk about something that I think is important with respect to the future of Call of Duty, and even make some predictions about what MW3 is going to look like based on all the information we have up to now. Now, I've said some of this off the cuff in live environments when we covered some of the Call of Duty news and some of the discussions, but I haven't done much with the game because I had high hopes for the PvE aspects of MW2 with Spec Ops and their first delving into raids, but so much of it just was not built very well and it didn't seem ready. There was lots of glitches and bugs with Spec Ops in its earliest days, and then DMZ seemed really promising and was something that I was devoting some time to, but eventually I just felt like so much of what I wanted had sort of fallen away that DMZ wasn't strong enough to keep my interest. And I know a lot of people got a lot of great times out of the DMZ, and the good news is they have expressed recently their desire to continue doing stuff with it. It's not going to be completely shelved. A lot of people thought it was going to be. But then MW3 emerges, and it was supposed to be, up to this point, all leaks, all insider information. It was meant to be DLC content for MW2. The post-credits of MW2 pointed to the story and the theme of what is coming in Modern Warfare 3, and it would have made, I think, perfectly good sense for that to be additive content, a substantive, $40 DLC with some missions and some maps. Then it becomes known that it's going to be billed as a full title. This happened first with the league with the Monster Energy drinks, and we saw the logo. And then we found out that a lot of the maps are going to be retreads of existing maps. And then throughout the year after the game launches, they'll be adding more. So you're basically getting a lot of retread. And then it kind of gets worse, at least in my mind, because they start talking about the fact that there will be open combat missions, and they're billing this as new, and they've never done this before. And that's going to be half of the campaign. So half of the campaign will be the classic cinematically driven campaign missions that we know and love. They've all but said this almost exactly how I just did. Like, that's going to be half of the missions. It's going to be what you're accustomed to, the more traditional cinematic story-driven campaign missions. I really liked the story in MW2 as well as in the reboot in Modern Warfare. I thought they did a really good job. I watched a whole replay of that, and it's almost at the caliber of like a TV show. If you remember watching 24 or The Unit, it's sort of at that caliber but baked into a video game. It's really impressive how far things have come with mocap and with voice acting, and I really enjoyed it. But then I heard, well, Modern Warfare 3, only half of the campaign missions are going to be like that. The other half are going to be open combat. And they're billing this as new, and we've never done this before, and they're trying to make it sound awesome. But I feel like I see right through it. From what I can tell, these open combat missions are going to be putting you on existing assets, existing locations and maps that they're bringing back, larger open space. Think about the map size in Spec Ops and how they drop you in, and then there's like objectives and things to do, but it's not a structured, sort of curated linear mission like you're accustomed to in Call of Duty, where there's a sort of cinematic thrust to it. It's almost baked in. You have car chases, you have to get on a gun mount, you have to hide, you have to be stealthy, you have to be quiet. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be more open and more free. And this, to me, is padding. It's almost as if they looked at what they had and thought, there's enough here that if we bake in some extras, reuse some old maps, we can build this as a full launch. I think they had a good, sizable $40 campaign, a $40 DLC for MW2, and they've now padded it out. That's my prediction. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope this thing ends up being worth it. People buy it and they're happy. I've always loved Call of Duty campaigns. My first playthrough of MW2 I thought was great. I had a really good time with it. Now, there were lots of bugs and glitches that the second time I played it, I was recording for content, and I had a much worse time. I had lots of bugs, lots of resets and soft locks, and just really, really not that polished. But it was beautiful. I thought the game looked amazing. I thought the sound design was impeccable and really enjoyed my time with it. So I hope that I'm wrong. But generally, my prediction is that that's what they're going to be doing. And this is related to the future cadence of Call of Duty. I think that games at this level of graphical fidelity and the work that they like to put into them with the voice acting, with the cinematics, everything that I highlighted as being so great in the Modern Warfare reboot and then the Modern Warfare 2 game, you can't do that every year. I just don't think it's possible. I think the bandwidth required to hit that level of quality, every 12 months just doesn't seem tenable, and I think this is how they're going to do it. They're going to be padding out their games with filler content, with existing locations, or the reuse of assets, and then they're going to drop you in those areas with very generic objectives, not that linear, curated, finely tuned cinematic Call of Duty experience that you're accustomed to. Even during the live event they had where they said this is one of the more traditional cinematic experiences where they go into the jail, it's awesome. It's amazing. They're in the water, they're in a boat, they're climbing. It's amazing. The lighting effects, it's awesome. But only half of the missions are going to be like that. And I really think this is going to end up being one of those times where I say, I told you so. I told you that half the missions were going to be kind of lame, kind of canned, unplanned, you're free, you can kind of go do whatever you want. Was Spec Ops really that thrilling? I mean, it was good, but it wasn't campaign. It wasn't what we're accustomed to in the last two Call of Duties, which I thought were quite good with respect to their campaigns. That feels kind of cheap. That feels kind of chintzy, but I think this is how they manage that future cadence. And this interview that we're going to look at here with Insider Gaming, this interview seems to point to, yep, we got games, plural, coming all the way out to like 2027. So I think they're reverting back to the annual release strategy. And the way they're going to do it is, it's basically always going to be a DLC amount of missions and maybe even maps. And then they're going to pad in there with open combat. I think open combat is their recipe to be filler for an annual release, and then there's likely going to be a rhythmic resurgence of old. We still have Black Ops 1, we still have Black Ops 2. That's what I think they're going to be doing, and that should get us, all the way to 2027. So let's take a look at this interview. Let's see what's going on here. So it says here, Call of Duty games through 2027 already planned out, says Activision. For those thinking Call of Duty franchise may slow down anytime soon, you may want to sit down. Activision has confirmed that the company has Call of Duty games planned out through 2027. In an interview with GamesBeat, Activision president Rob Kostich said that the company is always in a long-term planning phase that includes looking at how games will look years down the line. Now keep in mind, part of my prediction here is that they looked at the DLC for MW2 and said, we can stretch that out and turn that into an annual release. And they now know, bandwidth-wise, what's required to do that. They can build that many missions, build that many maps, pad it out with remake maps, pad it out with open combat, and then slowly release the maps throughout the year, and that's an annual release. They can now put a full price tag on it. Now, that's not necessarily me saying it's not worth it. I just think people need to go in with their eyes wide open. This isn't going to be a traditional Call of Duty release that you might be accustomed to with respect to the campaign length and how much is going to be involved. I'm not trying to bash this ahead of time, but I'm trying to make a prediction. I'm telling you, this is not going to be what you're used to. You're not going to get what you got in the Modern Warfare reboot or the Modern Warfare 2 follow-up. I don't think so. And here's the quote. It says, right now we have games planned out all the way through 27 for the things that we're working on. In addition, Kostich said that the planning phase allows the company to go back and look at lessons learned throughout the years with Call of Duty. From settings to gameplay features, he said it's about finding a sweet spot, right? And so he says here, anything that's happened in the past is a great learning experience. I think we've done a lot of games in the future. We've probably went as far as we possibly could. We made some of the games in the past. You start to see the sweet spot over time and what really resonates with the community. I definitely think going all the way to the future kind of burned them a little bit, and I think it felt a little weird, a little chintzy, and so they kind of retreated back. And I do feel like they've kind of found that sweet spot. I don't know if they're going to go all the way back to like a World War title ever again, at least not in the near future, which is why I think the next sort of nostalgic pull will be Black Ops. I think the Black Ops 1 story is probably one of the most memorable of all of them. The Numbers Mason, that whole, the entire twist at the end. I thought it was so well done, and that's the one I think that many people think of when they think of the most memorable, the most iconic Call of Duty campaign. That's at least one of the one that people cite. I'm not going to say that's the best, but I think that's the one that tends to be the most memorable and the most referenced. So the weaponry in Black Ops 1 and 2 and beyond was definitely not super dated. It wasn't like World War. I remember using things like a FAMAS and things like an M16, so you definitely had more modern weaponry as opposed to going back to where you're using like an M1 Garand and a Thompson and stuff like that. So let's see what he has to say, though, about looking at some of the past franchises. He says, you see things like Modern Warfare and Black Ops franchises are really popular. We've certainly had some other games that have done really well, like the original World War II game from Sledgehammer in 2017 did really, really well as well. It's a balance. I think most importantly, that we feel like we actually need to provide good differentiated experiences, good things for people to get in and feel like they're experiencing new kinds of fun. I don't think it's a coincidence that he mentioned Black Ops alongside Modern Warfare here. I think he's sort of letting us see one of the cards in his hands, right? He's saying, yeah, those are really popular. Well, they're going to tap out on Modern Warfare, I think, after MW3. We'll have a whole year. You'll have all these missions. They'll round out the story, and then it'll be time to do a Black Ops. They'll reboot Black Ops the way they rebooted Modern Warfare. They'll reboot it with a title called Black Ops, and then that'll set them up for 3 years of content. Think about it. He said they have games planned out to 2027. So if in 2024 they reboot Black Ops, guess what? That gets them 3 years. That's what they've gotten out of Modern Warfare's reboot. So you can definitely see that pattern potentially emerging here and that being a potential plan here. I don't think he invoked Black Ops by accident. Let's continue reading here. As far as Activision's focus on the franchise, Kostic says it remains high within the company, so much that the company has 3,000 developers actively working on the series because of both priority and what it takes to make new Call of Duty games. Quote, these games are quite labor intensive now. You see everyone doing this. All the big games are. Quite big teams are trying to pull these things together. They're monumental efforts. This right here, these two paragraphs, so much touch on what I said at the beginning with respect to the cadence here is so difficult. If you're going to try to do an annual release of a game at the caliber and the quality that Call of Duty usually hits with its story and the writing and the voice acting and the mocap, this is a Herculean effort to get these types of games out the door. 3,000 developers are actively working on the franchise. That's Warzone, that's the next Call of Duty, that's maintaining the current Call of Duty, that's map packs, that's battle passes, that's all of it. That is a ton of bandwidth. And in order for them to maintain that cadence, I think that's why we're getting a glimpse with Modern Warfare 3 of what the future is. I think the future is that padded annual release that's leaning heavily on reused assets, existing assets from the previous game, reused or existing assets from old games, and then taking one big space and building it so they can use it multiple times. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the open combat missions, you're going back to the same map, but then you're on a different part of it. Maybe instead of being over here at this point of interest, the next time you're over here. Well, that's them getting capital out of a space they've already built. The linear structure of the campaigns, they're building all these areas and roads and houses and fights. I mean, the one Modern Warfare 2 mission where you end up down, you start in a town, then you're in a house, then you're running, and then you end up in the water, and then you're under a bridge. Like, all of that has to be built, and you use it like one time. That's it. Imagine building a space the size of the map for Spec Ops, or maybe even something as large as the DMZ. And then you go back multiple times and you use different points of interest and different buildings for open combat missions. I am open to those open combat missions delivering and maybe cutting down costs for the developer. They don't have to record a bunch of cinematics. They don't have to create a bunch of curated experiences where cars are chasing you or different things are happening, like a helicopter's coming out of nowhere. They can do that in the open spaces a lot easier. Certainly during Spec Ops and DMZ, cars, vehicles, and helicopters show up. They can still have some of the bombast without necessarily needing to curate such scripted events. So I'm open to that working, but I just really think it's going to feel thin. It's going to feel padded, and we're going to come back and say, yep, you called it. You said that this was going to feel this way. It's not going to feel like a fully priced game, and I'm open to being wrong. I played virtually every Call of Duty campaign since the first one, whenever it hit PC back in the day. It was like one of the first PC games that I branched out of from playing like Quake and Unreal Tournament. I would love to know what you think. Do you think I'm right? Do you think Open Combat's leading that way? Do you think that's how they maintain the cadence? Do you think we're going back to Black Ops? And is that going to be the next 3 years once they're kind of done with MW, with MW3 being sort of the capstone to the story? I'd love to know what you think. You can leave a comment below. But if you're a member, you get to roll over into a debrief. My daily talk shows always come over into an upload, and then the upload always goes over into a members-only debrief. That's typically the day's rhythm. So you can join for $5, and you can become a part of that. If you watch enough, you might get it gifted. If you can't do that, that's totally fine. Hit subscribe and the bell button. That way I can see you in the next video.